Coming up on Mountain News at 6, with Election Day almost here, both Daniel Cameron and Governor Andy Beshear make one last push on the campaign trail. And forest fires continue to burn in parts of the mountains, so look at the efforts to get them under control.
Plus, we are tracking warm and dry weather in the short term, but some changes are on the way. Your forecast coming up as Mountain News at 6 starts now.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 6.
With Election Day just hours away now, incumbent Governor Andy Beshear is hoping to keep his job and serve a second term, which is why he made a final trip through the Big Sandy today, asking his supporters to show up at the polls. WYMT's Buddy Forbes was there as the Beshear bus parked in Pike County.
And this team of Andy Beshear and Jacqueline Coleman plan on delivering 4 more years. Can you make sure it happens?
A rally for re-election pops up in Pikeville Monday.
The election tomorrow is going to set the tone for the next 4 years, but I think the next several decades.
With Governor Andy Beshear and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman using the final hours before Election Day to bring the people to the polls.
The only poll that matters is the results on Tuesday. Listen, we're excited. We believe we go into this final day ahead because we see these crowds and this energy. People believing this isn't my campaign, it's our campaign.
Beshear says with the current state of the Commonwealth and all of the work he feels his team has been successful in completing during his term as governor.
We've been through a pandemic, tornadoes, floods, windstorms, ice storms, yet here I stand more hopeful, more optimistic.
He wants to keep the mission in focus, saying the waters in Kentucky have been muddy enough.
We're running for something, and my opponent is running against someone. If all you have is negative things to say about somebody else, you're not the person to lead all of us into the future.
And while the early polling research suggests a tight race between Beshear and Attorney General Daniel Cameron, he says proven progress will be the real deciding factor for the people.
We're winning every single day, and when you're on a historic win streak, you don't fire the coach, you don't sub out the quarterback, you put that team on the field, you rack up the wins, you bring home some championships. It is Kentucky's time for championships.
And he hopes the Commonwealth will keep him in the game.
Let's get out there, let's get it done.
In Pikeville, Buddy Forbes, WYMT Mountain News.
Governor Beshear also made a stop in Prestonburg today. He says every vote will count in this election, and recent polls suggest the governor's race could be a nail-biter. As for Beshear's opponent, Attorney General Daniel Cameron, he also made some stops around the Commonwealth today. He started his day at Fort Wright in northern Kentucky. He later visited Lexington and Louisville and then went to Bowling Green. He was scheduled to wrap up the day in Elizabethtown. Cameron, who was joined by his running mate, Senator Robbie Mills, says they are ready to take the state in another direction.
When it's come to our education system, this is a governor in Andy Beshear who shut down our schools for nearly 2 years, and our kids have significant learning loss because of it.
And in somewhat of a surprise announcement, Cameron says he will be joined by former President Donald Trump in a tele-rally later tonight. Of course, everyone will be keeping an eye on the governor's race, but one big down-ballot race is for Secretary of State. Incumbent Michael Adams is going head-to-head with challenger Charles Buddy Wheatley. Both candidates have different ideas on how long they want the window to be for early voting. Adams says he wants to keep early voting at 3 days in non-presidential voting years, while Wheatley wants to expand it.
I want to protect the 3 days that we got, the quadrupling of voting days that we got already for Kentuckians.
We're still one of the hardest places to vote in the country. We don't have very many early voting days. The average is 23. We have 3 early voting days.
Kentucky is also a closed primary state, meaning that the primary elections are limited to those who are registered party members. Secretary of State Adams says more than 260,000 Kentuckians took advantage of the state's 3 days of early voting. Dr. Stephen Voss is a specialist in elections and voting behavior. He says research on one of the biggest issues, abortion, suggests it is not necessarily a men versus women topic. In Kentucky's past 2 gubernatorial elections, voter turnout among men and women has been fairly similar, within roughly 1% of each other. Well, the polls open at 6 a.m. tomorrow. WYMT's Chandler Wilcox talked to Secretary of State Michael Adams about rules for folks to be aware of when they go out and vote.
Voting is at the core of American democracy, and Secretary of State Michael Adams says it is important you feel comfortable making your choice.
There's a barrier for good reason. We don't want people being harassed when they go to vote. So you can put your yard signs out and so forth. But within 100 feet of that voting location, there's no politicking.
The Secretary of State says it is one of the more common complaints they get.
We wrote up a law, a bipartisan law. We had both sides together on this to add protections for everybody in this system. It takes 15,000 people to run an election in Kentucky.
Not only voters, but authorities and poll workers are protected as well.
So that's the sort of thing that we get a lot of calls about. It's usually not the campaigns. They're more professional than that. It's well-meaning supporters who just don't know the law.
If there is a complaint filed with standing and potentially changing the outcome, the losing candidate has the option to sue.
If there is a dispute, if there is alleged fraud, we have a law in Kentucky called the election contest law. And if there is evidence of fraud, corruption, or even an honest mistake or administrative error that changes the outcome of an election.
Adams says those are rare cases, but spotting it can be the difference between a fair and unfair outcome. In Hazard, Chandler Wilcox, WYMT Mountain News.
Now, the hotline to report potential election fraud is 1-800-328-VOTE or 8683. That complaint will go to the Secretary of State's office, state police, and the State Board of Elections to review. And we want to remind you once again, polls open tomorrow, November 7th at 6 a.m. They close at 6 p.m. If you are in line at 6 p.m., you will still be allowed to vote. If you do not know where to cast your ballot, you can visit govote.ky.gov to find your polling location. And of course, join us here and on WYMT.com tomorrow night beginning at 6 o'clock for those results as they come in.
We are tracking some dry, also calm weather across the mountains into your Monday evening. Here's a live look from the London Corbin Airport. And again, we are under a clear sky. That temperature at 69 degrees. Most of us in the middle to upper 60s and a few lower 70s as well, up to 70 in Harlan, 67 for Jackson, 66 over in Manchester, and 65 over in Pikeville. So once again, we are calm as we go into this evening. The big story, that dry weather does continue. We have an abnormally dry conditions over much of the region right now. You can see that moderate drought though for the Cumberland Valley, also into southern Kentucky. And we do stay dry for much of this week. Well, we are watching out though for an increase in those rain chances on Thursday, also Friday, all thanks to a cold front. So we are watching out for those rain chances later on this week. Also some chilly weather as we go into this weekend. Those details coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. Firefighters rushed to protect several homes from forest fires in Harlan County today. You might remember a state of emergency was declared in that county yesterday. Fires have been burning across parts of eastern Kentucky since last week. Hundreds of acres have burned in Harlan County alone. Volunteer firefighters in the Everett's community joined State Division of Forestry firefighters this afternoon in working to contain a fire that was coming down a hill close to several homes. Fires were burning in several parts of Harlan County today. Well, one person is dead after a crash in Rowan County. It happened last night just after 8 at the intersection of Kentucky 32 and West Sun Street in Moorhead. After police arrived at the scene, they discovered a motorcycle had hit a car. A man and a woman who were riding in the motorcycle were seriously injured after being taken to St. Clair Medical Center in Moorhead. 47-year-old Matthew Corson died. The woman was flown to Campbell Huntington Hospital. Her condition is not known. A well-known hazard attorney and education advocate has died. Bruce Stevens was born in Magoffin County and began working in Hazard in 1950 as an attorney for Kentucky River Coal Corporation. He served there for 36 years, where he was also executive vice president. He had an extensive record of service to Hazard Community and Technical College. His efforts also led to more than $3 million being given out to local schools. He served on numerous boards and organizations and was a World War II veteran. His wife, Virginia, died last year. They were married nearly 70 years. His visitation will be held Thursday from 11 a.m. until the funeral at 1 p.m. at Maggard's Mountain View Chapel in Hazard. Bruce Stevens, Jr. was 99.
Well, we are watching out for rain chances to increase later this week. Those details coming up after this break.